At number 10, Dyatlov Pass. On the night of February 1st, 1959, 9 ski hikers were sent to an early grave due to mysterious reasons in the mountains of Russia. The group set up camp on a slope, enjoyed some food, and prepared for sleep, but something went terribly wrong. On February 26th, a day before my birthday by the way, searchers found an abandoned tent that was ripped open from the inside. Surrounding the area of tents were footsteps with prints of socks, a single shoe, and bare feet. Following the steps led the searchers to the bodies of 2 individuals, both completely naked except for their underwear. The bodies seemed to have been affected by hypothermia, but medical examiners found that the 2 individuals, along with the other 7 found later, wouldn't have passed away from hypothermia. Discovered while examining their bodies was one body with evidence of a blunt force trauma consistent with a brutal assault. Another had 3rd-degree burns, one had been vomiting blood, one was missing a tongue, and some of their clothing was found to be radioactive. Number 9. Ghost Ship. On December 4th, 1872, a British-American ship called the Mary Celeste was found empty and adrift in the Atlantic. It was found to be seaworthy and with its cargo fully intact, except for a lifeboat, which it appeared had been boarded in an orderly fashion. But why? We may never know because no one on board was ever heard from again. In November 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York bound for Genoa, Italy. She was manned by Captain Benjamin Briggs and 7 crew members, including Briggs's wife and their 2-year-old daughter. Supplies on board were ample enough for 6 months, and luxurious, including a sewing machine and an upright piano. Commentators generally agree that to precipitate the abandonment of a seaworthy ship, some extraordinary and alarming circumstances must have arisen. However, the last entry on the ship's daily log reveals nothing unusual, and inside the ship, all appeared to be in order. Number 8. D.B. Cooper. Dan Cooper was a passenger on Northwest Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle, a 30-minute flight. He took his seat, lit a cigarette, and politely ordered a bourbon and soda, for which he paid cash. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a 23-year-old flight attendant, who ignored it at first, assuming it was just the man's phone number. "Miss, you'd better look at that note," Dan Cooper told her. "I have an explosive." The note's exact wording is part of the mystery, since Cooper reclaimed it after the flight attendant read it. But his demands were for $200,000 in negotiable American currency, worth $1 million today. 4 parachutes and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane on arrival. The flight attendant brought the demands to the captain. The airline's president authorized full cooperation. The other passengers had no idea what was happening, having been told that landing was delayed due to mechanical difficulties. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed, an airline employee delivered a cash-filled knapsack and parachutes, and Cooper allowed all passengers and 2 flight attendants to leave the plane. During refueling, Cooper outlined his plan to the crew, a southeasterly course toward Mexico with 1 further refueling stop in Nevada. 2 hours later, the plane took off. When it landed in Reno, Cooper's absence was noted. Cooper, whom the media mistakenly referred to as D.B. Cooper, was never seen or heard from again. No parachute was found, and the ransom money was never used. At number 7, living statues. Encephalitis lethargica, aka the sleeping sickness, first appeared in Europe and quickly spread around the world, reaching epidemic levels in North America, Europe, and India by 1919. About a third of those stricken with the illness passed away. Of the survivors, nearly half eventually found themselves unable to physically interact with the world around them, all the while fully aware of their surroundings, like sleep paralysis. Though occasionally capable of limited speech, eye motion, and even laughter, they generally appeared as living statues, totally motionless for hours, days, weeks, or years. The cause is unknown, but one theory is brain inflammation triggered by a rare strain of Streptococcus, the bacteria responsible for many sore throats each year. Science's best guess is that the bacteria mutated, provoking the immune system to attack the brain, leaving the victim helpless. Number 6, ruins of the past. It's not unusual to find junk in Brazil's Guanabara Bay, but what Robert Marks unearthed there in 1982 was an unusual kind of foreign matter. In an underwater field the size of 3 tennis courts located 15 miles from shore lay the remains of some 200 Roman ceramic jars, a few fully intact. According to Marks, a professional treasure hunter, the jars appeared to be twin-handled amphora that were used to transport goods such as grains and wine in the 3rd century. But how did they get there? The first Europeans didn't reach Brazil until 1500. The Romans, who traded primarily in the Mediterranean port cities and the Middle East, had little incentive to invest in ships that could cross oceans. However, they did sail as far as India. Perhaps some untrained navigator lost his way in the storm, or maybe mutineers steered the ship westward. Number 5. The Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is a roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language/writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. It is believed to have been intended as a medical text. Its first confirmed owner was George Barysh, an alchemist from Prague who discovered it, taking up space uselessly in his library. Barysh tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript changed hands for centuries until it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. However, some believe that Voynich fabricated the manuscript and its history all by himself. Various other hoaxes have been proposed over the years. Of course, that wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink. Centuries after its alleged discovery, the Voynich manuscript remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. Number 4. Walter Collins. In 2008, Clint Eastwood's film Changeling reawakened interest in one of the most bizarre and tragic crime stories of the 1920s. Single mom Christine Collins reported her son Walter missing in March 1928 from their home in Los Angeles. 5 months later, the police brought Walter back to Christine, except it wasn't Walter, and Christine knew it.
Why are you doing this, Mrs. Collins?
You have stopped looking for my son.
Why should we be looking for someone we've already found?
But the LAPD dismissed Christine's concerns, going so far as to accuse her of terrible mothering and having her committed to a mental hospital. The real Walter Collins was never found, and over time, authorities came to believe he was one of the victims of convicted executioner Gordon Stewart Northcott, although Northcott's mother offered a confession for ending Walter. Whatever happened to Walter Collins, his body was never found, and no one ever learned what really happened. Nor has it been established with any certainty why the police were so invested in covering up the boy's disappearance that they brought a different child back to Christine and tried to convince her and the rest of the world that it was Walter. Number 3. Flannan Isles disappearances. In 1900, 3 keepers of the Flannan Isles lighthouse off the west coast of Scotland disappeared under the strangest of circumstances. The lighthouse was manned by a 3-person team, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur, with a 4th man rotating in from shore. On Boxing Day, December 26th of 1900, the relief keeper arrived to find none of the lighthouse keepers present. The only sign that anything was amiss was an overturned chair near the kitchen table. No bodies were ever found, which has led to endless speculation. Theories range from drownings to abduction by foreign spies, a ghost ship, or a giant sea monster. Whatever happened back in December 1900 at the Flannan Isles lighthouse, we may never know. Perhaps this was one of the inspirations for the Lighthouse film. Whoever's watching this, you need to watch The Lighthouse, directed by Nathan Eggman. It's a banger. It's in 4:3 aspect ratio and it's only black and white. Slapper. Anyways, number 2, Circleville letters. In 1976, residents of Circleville, Ohio began receiving hate mail that has wreaked havoc ever since. The letters, postmarked from Columbus, were invasive and accusatory, highlighting a supposed affair between school bus driver Mary Gillespie and the school superintendent. One letter addressed to Mary's husband, Ron, threatened his life if he didn't put a stop to the affair. By 1977, the husband was gone from the world, the result of a suspicious 1-car crash involving shots fired. When the sheriff ruled the passing an accident, however, residents began receiving letters accusing the sheriff of a cover-up. The letters continued throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, and even after Ron's sister's husband, Paul Fresher, was convicted of writing the letters and attempting to end Mary via a booby-trap-rigged pistol, even with Fresher in prison, however, the letters continued. He even received one himself. In 1994, Fresher was released and he maintained his innocence until his passing in 2012. The true identity of the Circleville letter writer remains unknown. Some still believe it was Fresher, others believe it was Mary herself, and that she used the letters to concoct and support the perfect execution of her own husband. Number 1. What list about mysteries would be complete without Area 51? Area 51 in southern Nevada is a US military base, the very existence of which was unconfirmed until 2013, when the CIA was obliged to respond to a Freedom of Information Act request from 2005. Based on historical evidence, it would appear that Area 51 supports the development and testing of experimental aircraft and weapons. Public satellite images, such as those available on Google Maps, don't provide any insight. Even those with security clearance to visit Area 51 are transported there from Las Vegas via an airline called Janet, whose planes are unmarked and which shrouds its windows upon descent. The intense secrecy around Area 51 has sparked rumors that the government uses it to house crashed UFOs and conduct lab tests on aliens. Other theories about what Area 51 is used for include research on time travel, research on teleportation, meetings with extraterrestrials, development of a means for weather control, and activities related to a shady one-world government. 10. Teddy Wang. Teddy Wang was born in Shanghai, China to Wenzinese parents, the son of paint and chemical business proprietor Wang Dinxin. He was a childhood playmate of Kung Yu Sam, and in 1948, when she was 11 and him being 15, they renewed their friendship, and they married in 1955. The Wangs moved to Hong Kong, and the business became the China Chem Group, eventually becoming one of the territory's largest and most powerful companies due to its lucrative pharmaceutical division. Wang was abducted on the 12th of April 1983 when his Mercedes-Benz was hijacked. He was taken away and chained to a bed for 8 days until Nina Wang paid a ransom of 33 million Hong Kong dollars. I feel like Hong Kong dollars is not the word for it. Until Nina Wang paid a ransom of $33 million. Wang was kidnapped again on the 10th of April 1990 as he left the Jockey Club in Hong Kong. His abductors demanded $60 million this time. His wife Nina paid an installment of $34 million, but Wang was not returned. Several of the alleged kidnappers were caught and said that the 56-year-old Wang had been thrown into the sea from a sampan on the 13th of April. If you don't know what a sampan is, it's a kind of boat. His body was never found and he was declared legally removed in 1999. Number 9. Annie McCarrick. McCarrick was born on Long Island, New York, and she lived there until her move to Ireland in January 1987. McCarrick disappeared on March 26, 1993. She had left her apartment in Dublin, Ireland, so that she could go to the Wicklow Mountains for the day. She had asked a friend to accompany her, but her friend declined. CCTV captured images of McCarrick in the Allied Irish Bank location in Sandymount, where she was seen withdrawing money from her bank account. She did some shopping at Quinsworth Supermarket before returning to her apartment at 3 p.m. She was seen on a bus at around 3:40 p.m. in Ranelagh heading toward Enniskerry. Sometime later that evening, between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m., the doorman at Johnny Fox's pub in Glencullen claims to have seen McCarrick at the pub, accompanied by a young man who was wearing a wax jacket.
Investigators believe the man looked something like this and issued this photo fit at the time.
Allegedly, McCarrick had gone to see an Irish music and dancing show that was a traditional event called the Hooley Show, but did not realize that there was a cover charge. McCarrick's male friend then paid for her and accompanied her in to watch the show. Nobody saw either McCarrick or her male friend leave the pub, and the man's identity has never been discovered. Number 8. Erin Mary Gilbert. On July 1st, 1995, Gilbert accompanied David Combs, a man whom she had met several days prior at a bar called Chilkoot Charlie's in Anchorage, to the Girdwood Forest Fair in Girdwood, Alaska, a village south of Anchorage. The two left Anchorage at approximately 4 p.m. Gilbert was last seen at the fair's beer garden with Combs before they left at approximately 6 p.m. At the time, she was wearing a black leather jacket, a black and white shirt, mountain boots, and black jeans. By Combs' account, he and Gilbert returned to his car, but found the battery not working, as he had left the headlights on. He claimed he told Gilbert he was going to a nearby friend's home to get help, and walked for around 2 hours, but was unable to locate his friend's residence. When he returned, Gilbert was no longer in the car. According to Combs, he assumed Gilbert had returned to the fair, and found that he was able to start the car engine. He then returned to the fairgrounds and searched for Gilbert unsuccessfully until approximately 1 in the morning. Number 7. Amy Bechtel. On the morning of July 24th, 1997, Bechtel told her husband Steve that she was planning on running several errands in town after teaching a children's weightlifting class at the Wind River Fitness Center. She stopped at Camera Connection, a photo store near her home in Lander, around 2:30 p.m. after teaching her class. Following her time at the photo store, she stopped by Gallery 331, where she spoke to the proprietor, Greg Wagner. Wagner noted that Bechtel seemed hurried, and repeatedly glanced at her watch during their conversation. Wagner's was the last confirmed sighting of Bechtel. After leaving the photo shop, it is believed by authorities that Bechtel drove to the Shoshone National Forest to practice the course of an upcoming 10K run she was enrolled to compete in. According to an eyewitness driving on Loop Road through the forest that afternoon, a woman resembling Bechtel was seen running along the road wearing black shorts similar to those she had worn earlier that day. At 4:30 p.m., Steve returned home after having spent the day with a friend and found his wife absent. At 10:30 p.m., he called the police to report his wife missing. At 1 in the morning, on the morning of July 25th, Bechtel's car, a white Toyota Tercel, was discovered parked on a turnout at Burnt Gulch in Lander. Number 6. Suzanne Lyle. On the night of March 2nd, 1998, Suzanne Lyle, an undergraduate at the State University of New York at Albany, left her job at the Babbages in Crossgates Mall in the nearby suburb of Westmere after the store had closed. She is believed to have taken a city bus from the mall back to the university's uptown campus, where a classmate has said she saw Lyle get off the bus at Collins Circle, a short walk from her dorm. She has never been seen again. The next morning, Lyle was reported missing. That afternoon, her credit card was used at a nearby convenience store's ATM to withdraw $20. According to her boyfriend, only she and he knew the PIN. He had a verified alibi for the time of her disappearance, but due to his later refusal to cooperate with the police, they have been unable to completely rule him out as a suspect. A man who used the ATM around the same time has also been ruled out. New York State Police continue to investigate the case. Number 5. Gilbert Winter. Winter worked as an enforcer for the Addams Family crime syndicate. In 1994, allegedly with assistance from fellow enforcer and future crime boss Ray Barton, he executed substance dealer Claude Mosley with a samurai sword, as punishment for pocketing profits from a substance operation run by the Addams family. He went on trial for the slaughter, but key witnesses refused to give evidence against him, one preferring to go to jail for contempt of court, and the case was dropped. On the 9th of March 1998, Winter left the house he shared with his girlfriend, driving off in her Nissan Micra. Later that day, he spoke to her by phone but did not disclose his location. Winter was never seen again, and the car was subsequently discovered abandoned in June. His bank account, credit card, and mobile phone have not been used since then. There are two main theories for the disappearance, both hinging on a leafy substance deal where 800,000 British pounds went missing. Either Winter double-crossed the Addams family, stole the money, and was removed accordingly in retribution, allegedly being buried somewhere in the foundations of the Millennium Dome, or fled to the Caribbean with the money and remained in hiding. Regardless, he was never found. Number 4. Maura Murray. Murray, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, was last seen on New Hampshire Route 112 at the scene of a minor one-vehicle accident, in which her car was disabled after crashing into a roadside snowbank. Earlier on the day of her disappearance, she had lied to professors about a passing in her family, stating that she would be absent from class for a week. A school bus driver who happened upon Murray's crash site stopped to ask if she needed help, and Murray declined. Upon returning home a short time later, the bus driver called police anyway, but by the time first responders arrived, 10 minutes later, Murray had vanished. Her keys, along with bank and credit cards, have never been located, despite extensive searches of her abandoned car and the neighboring wooded areas. Number 3. Ray Gricar. At 11:30 in the morning on April 15, 2005, Gricar called for Nicola to inform her that he was driving through the Brush Valley area northeast of Center Hall. Gricar failed to return home, and late that evening, Nicola reported him missing. The following day, investigators identified Gricar's red Mini Cooper in the parking lot of an antique store in Lewisburg. The car contained his county-issued cell phone, but not his laptop, computer, keys, or wallet. Investigators identified no signs of foul play. Police and family members noted that the location of the vehicle, adjacent to two bridges over the Susquehanna River, bore some similarities to the location of the vehicle of Gricar's older brother Roy when he decided to take his own life in 1996. In the days following the discovery of Gricar's vehicle, authorities searched the river and its banks but found no sign of him. Police also noted that a sniffer dog's behavior around where Gricar's car was found suggested that he might have gotten into another vehicle with someone else. Pennsylvania authorities asked the FBI to analyze Gricar's bank accounts, credit card records, and cell phone records, but found no clues as to where he might have been. On July 30th, fishermen discovered Gricar's county-issued laptop in the Susquehanna River beneath a bridge between Lewisburg and Milton, but its hard drive was missing. Divers searched the area of the river near where it was found over the next several days, but found nothing else. 2 months later, someone discovered a hard drive on the banks of the Susquehanna River about 100 yards, or 91 meters, from the location of the laptop, and investigators hypothesized that it had come from his computer. However, it was badly damaged in analysis by the FBI and the US Secret Service, and the data recovery firm Kroll On Track failed to recover anything from it. Number 2, Robert Levinson. Levinson was a retired US DEA and FBI agent. He was last seen in the custody of who seemed to be Iranian intelligence agents on the 9th of March 2007 on Kish Island. He had gone there to set up a meeting with Dawood Salahuddin, an American-born convert to Islam, ostensibly about securing the Iranian government's help in controlling the distribution of pirated American cigarettes in Iran. He was later revealed to be working for the CIA at that time as well. In 2010, a video of him somewhat emaciated was released.
I have been held here for 3.5 years. I am not in very good health. I am running very quickly out of diabetes medicine,
in which he begs for help from the US government to be released. The US government has regularly raised the issue of his release with Iran as part of talks between the countries, but Iran's statement as to whether he still is in their custody or even alive have been contradictory. And Levinson is thought to be no longer under their control if he is still alive. His family announced on the 25th of March 2020 that he is presumed to have passed away. Number 1, Jamie Fraley. In the early hours of April 8, 2008, Jamie Fraley of Gastonia, North Carolina, United States, told a friend over the phone that she was going to the hospital for the 3rd time in the last 24 hours due to a stomach flu. When asked who was taking her there, Fraley said it was another friend and declined to further identify that person. She has not been seen since. Her cell phone was found a few days later but provided no useful information as to her whereabouts. Investigators initially believed she had met with foul play and began focusing on Ricky Simons Sr., her fiance's father, who lived in the same apartment complex, as a person of interest. He had driven Fraley to the hospital on one of her previous visits that day and had a criminal record that included prison time for manslaughter after he had strangled a girlfriend in the 1980s. However, the investigation ended 2 months later when Simons was found passed away, apparently of heat stroke in the trunk of a former girlfriend's car. In 2015, a prison inmate confessed that he had terminated Fraley, but he was incarcerated at the time Fraley disappeared. Number 10, John Dillinger. John Dillinger, one of the most notorious criminals in American history, was often glorified by the American media for his daring bank heists and thrilling prison escapes. He operated in the 20s and 30s during the Great Depression era, and was idolized by many as the modern-day Robin Hood, because he stole from those same institutions that were capitalizing on the American people's misfortunes. Dillinger's career as a criminal included over 11 bank robberies throughout the Midwest, in which he stole in excess of $300 $300,000 and 3 separate jailbreaks. The mystique surrounding Dillinger's exploits was so captivating that people often forgot or turned a blind eye to the fact that he was responsible for at least 10 slaughters, including that of a sheriff, the passings of several innocent bystanders, and that he left a trail of carnage in his wake. Dillinger's activities, however, did not go unnoticed by Chief Investigator Melvin Purvis of the FBI, who is assigned the task of bringing Dillinger and his gang to justice. When J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI named Dillinger the first public enemy #1 on his 31st birthday in 1934, his fame took on a new meaning, and his name and face became recognizable in every household throughout the Midwest and the rest of the country. There was even a $10,000 reward for his capture. Now a public figure, Dillinger turned to plastic surgery to alter his identity and evade Purvis and the rest of the law enforcement community. In those days, plastic surgery was not as common as it is today, and the medical procedures were primitive, dangerous, time-consuming, and very painful. Dillinger underwent several bouts of plastic surgery, some more successful than others, but in the end he only managed to slightly alter his appearance. After one round of plastic surgery, from which he was extremely disappointed to find that he still looked the same, one of the doctors suggested that he remove his fingerprints as a way to escape being detected. Dillinger liked this idea and elected to undergo the painful process of obliterating his fingerprints. Number 9, Freddie Thompson. According to the New York Times, Freddie Thompson, 35, switched places with another prisoner during an arraignment. The other prisoner was facing a less serious charge of a leafy substance possession, and consequently, Thompson was mistakenly released. Thompson, who was caught for attempted execution and served prison time after pleading guilty to a lesser count including robbery charges, managed to fool authorities by making the identity change. It is unclear how exactly he was able to pose as the other prisoner during his arraignment in a Staten Island courtroom. The mistake points to a series of recent problems by the area's law enforcement agencies. In February, a prisoner posed as a different defendant at an arraignment on a lesser charge. That fugitive, Michael Bautista, 22, is still at large. Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly has rejected the idea that the escaped prisoner exploited a possible loophole. There are ways to verify a prisoner's identity, including checking pictures, he said, but apparently that may not have been done appropriately. Each year, about 400,000 arrests are made and prisoners are processed. The judge released Thompson on his own recognizance. Thompson walked out of court scot-free. It wasn't until several hours later, when the prisoner who Thompson impersonated asked why his name hadn't been called, that authorities realized a mistake had occurred. Number 8, Bela Kiss. Bela Kiss was a Hungarian serial executioner who cops believe ended 24 people. Kiss was nicknamed the Hungarian Pickler because he preserved his victims' bodies in large barrels. Born in Hungary in 1877, he had a rough childhood. In 1912, only a year after marrying his much younger wife, he discovered she was having an affair. Soon after, she and her lover would disappear. Although Kiss claimed that they had left together for a better life in America, the truth was that he ended both of them, becoming Kiss's first victims. This was the start of his execution spree, but for the rest of his victims, he lured women in. Through personal ads in the local Budapest newspaper, he placed ads under the name of Hoffman, claiming to be a lonely widower looking for marriage. He connected with women who were generally well off and whose families were not living nearby. His good looks and personable charm helped to attract them. He was even able to have some of the women sign over their wealth and give him money. Number 7, Frank Morris. In 1960, Frank Morris was sentenced to serve a prison term at Alcatraz. You know the place. The infamous penitentiary was built in 1934 on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Isolated in the water more than a mile from San Francisco, it was designed as an inescapable jail. But when brothers Clarence and John Anglin got to Alcatraz in 1961 and befriended Morris, the trio decided to put the island's reputation to the test. The three men stuffed plaster dummies in their cell beds in the middle of the night. With roving guards believing the men were asleep, they quietly escaped through carefully cut holes in their cells. Once outside, they fashioned a makeshift raft out of raincoats and set sail into the bay in the middle of the night. They were never seen again. Initially, prison guards assumed the three men had been eaten by sharks. That is still a distinct possibility, but ocean currents would have undoubtedly brought body parts up to shore. Instead, no trace of the men's remains, clothes, or raft has ever been found. Because of that, authorities aren't actually certain whether they successfully escaped or not. If they did escape, however, you bet that they changed their names and their identities. Number 6. Between the spring of 1968 and the fall of 1969, 3 women were terminated in Glasgow, Scotland. Patricia Docker was strangled to passing in February 1968. Her crime went unpunished. A year later, Jemima McDonald was strangled in a nearby neighborhood. 2 months after that, Helen Puddock was also brutally ended in Glasgow. By then, cops started to realize similarities in all 3 slaughters. DNA testing wasn't the norm back then, but police picked up on patterns of how the girls were ended and where they were found. Cops also began to hone in on a description of the butcher, a redhead between the ages of 25 and 35 who's around 6 feet (1.8 meters) tall. Upon distributing a sketch to the media, cops labeled the butcher Bible John. It came from Puddock's passing. She and her sister had met 2 men during a night out on the town. Both men were named John. Puddock's date for the evening had an infatuation with quoting the Bible. Throughout the night, he delivered impassioned sermons from the book of Moses. The women jokingly called him Bible John. The name kinda stuck. Number 5. Frank Matthews. Frank Matthews was a notorious substance kingpin in the early 1970s. The New York City native was one of the largest suppliers of substances in the United States. His operations stretched from New York to Miami. Police believed Matthews cleared more than $20 million from his substance empire. He had a network of over 200 dealers working for him, all selling substances he bought from Colombian sources. His operation was so successful that it destroyed the profits of the rest of New York City's substance dealers. This led to tensions between Matthews and other dealers. In 1972, 2 of his associates were ended in a drive-by shooting. Matthews himself narrowly avoided being stopped when an explosive was placed under his car. In 1973, after an arrest, Matthews jumped bail and disappeared. Some believe he was ended by rivals, others say he went into hiding to avoid the lifelong prison sentence that surely would have followed. If he did go into hiding, then we know he changed his identity. That's just the smart thing to do. Number 4. The Freeway Phantom. The Freeway Phantom was a self-given moniker for a Washington, D.C. serial butcher who has never been identified. The butcher was active around America's capital in the early 1970s. In total, he ended 6 young women over a 17-month period. Like the Zodiac butcher before him, the Freeway Phantom sent creepy messages to the police. After executing 18-year-old Brenda Denise Woodard in November 1971, police found a note in one of her pockets. This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. Freeway Phantom. The Phantom name stuck as police found more bodies near highways and other main thoroughfares around Washington. Police worked leads in the 6 passings, including one long look at 2 ex-cops who were convicted of a separate execution. However, they failed to make any headway in finding the butcher. In 1974, the FBI stepped in and added to the list of suspects. The Freeway Phantom appeared to leave as quickly as he arrived. No more passings were linked to his pattern after that awful 17-month period early in the decade. And soon, the case went cold. The investigation is still active in DC to this day, though cops have been criticized for shoddy evidence keeping and a lack of progress on the awful case. Number 3. Victor Garena. Victor Garena was an employee of a Wells Fargo armored car in West Hartford, Connecticut in 1983. That summer, he was recruited by the militant group Los Macheteros to help with a bank heist. The activist group wanted independence for Puerto Rico. Their clandestine run had previously targeted American government officials. Now they were seeking money to fund their operations. Garena's knowledge of the armored car depot made him a natural recruit for Los Maqueteros leader Juan Enrique Segarra Palmer. When Garena led the heist on September 12, 1983, it all fell into place. The Wells Fargo employee tied up 2 of his coworkers and injected them with sedatives to make them fall asleep. He then loaded more than $7 million cash into a rental car and drove off. At the time, it was the largest cash heist in American history. Neither Garena nor the money was ever seen again. Segarra Palmer wasn't so lucky. In 1985, the FBI tracked down Segarra Palmer and 8 of his Los Maqueteros peers in Puerto Rico. They were extradited to Connecticut and convicted on a variety of charges relating to the bank heist and other events. The ringleader was sentenced to 55 years in prison and served about 2 decades before being freed in 2004. Garena has likely fared far better though. He was never found. Number 2. John Ruffo. John Ruffo is one of the rare escaped fugitives not wanted for a violent crime. The businessman had a lengthy career scamming and defrauding investors to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. His most lucrative scheme, according to authorities, was to pose as an executive of the Philip Morris Tobacco Company and convince banks to grant him fraudulent loans. Cops claim Ruffo went around to banks boasting of a research program called Project Star. He would tell finance officials the project was geared toward developing smoke-free cigarettes for the tobacco giant, and they needed seed money to buy computers for the supposed research. It was all a ruse though. Banks would grant loans to Ruffo's company, CCS Inc., and he would simply vanish with the cash. For a while he got away with the scheme and eventually pocketed some $350 million in phony investments. Number 1. Amado Carrillo. In the 1980s and 1990s, Amado Carrillo Fuentes was one of the most successful substance smugglers in North America. The Mexican man created an empire for the Juarez cartel. He smuggled more substances from Colombia to the United States than anyone else in the world. Cops knew him as the Lord of the Skies, for the fleet of private planes he used to fly massive quantities of substances all over the world. However, it all ended in the most unlikely way. Fuentes passed away in 1997 during plastic surgery. The substance kingpin had been trying to change his appearance to avoid being captured by DEA agents. Unfortunately, a surgical mishap left him passed on the operating table. With it, his substance empire came crashing down. For police, Fuentes' passing was bittersweet. The man they'd spent so much years chasing was removed and gone. He never faced justice over his substance empire though. By going to his grave prematurely, Fuentes forever avoided the wrath of the law. At number 10, Joaquin Arquivaldo Guzman Lora. Commonly known as El Chapo, he's a Mexican former substance lord and a former leader within the Sinaloa cartel, an international crime syndicate. He is considered to have been one of the most powerful substance traffickers in the world. Guzman was born in Sinaloa and raised in a poor farming family. He endured physical abuse at the hands of his father and also entered the substance trade through his father, helping him grow a leafy green for local dealers during his early adulthood. Guzman began working with Hector Luis Palma Salazar by the late 1970s, one of the nation's rising substance lords. He helped Salazar map routes to move substances through Sinaloa and into the United States. He later supervised logistics for Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, one of the nation's leading kingpins in the mid-1980s, but Guzman founded his own cartel in the 1988 after Gallardo's arrest. Guzman oversaw operations whereby many different substances were produced, smuggled into, and distributed throughout the United States and Europe, the world's largest users. He achieved this by pioneering the use of distribution cells and long-range tunnels near borders, which enabled him to export more substances to the United States than any other trafficker in history. Guzman's leadership of the cartel also brought immense wealth and power. Forbes ranked him as one of the most powerful people in the world between 2009 and 2013.
Si vos seguís comprando así, vas a aparecer en la revista Forbes.
At number 9, Jesus Alfredo Salazar Ramirez. His alias is El Muñeco, or El Pelos, who is identified as the current lieutenant of the South Pacific Cartel in the state of Sonora. As stated by Sedina, the Mexican Secretary of National Defense, El Muñeco worked as an administrator under Joaquin Guzman Lora and is believed to be responsible for the execution of the activist Nepomuceno Moreno. Jesus Alfredo Salazar Ramirez was arrested on the 1st of November 2012 in the municipality of Huiquilucan by military personnel working with the Mexican Attorney General's office. El Muñeco is considered to be one of the most important lieutenants of Joaquin Guzman Lora, evident from his control of the planting, production, and trafficking of substances in Sonora and in the mountains of Chihuahua, which were sent predominantly to the US. He's linked to various executions, among them the lawyer Ruben Alejandro Cupeda Leos, who was assassinated on the 20th of December 2011 in the city of Chihuahua, Chihuahua. According to the Sedena, he is the assumed assassin of an activist, which occurred on the 28th of November 2011. The activist sought justice for the disappearance of his son and joined the Mexican Indignados movement, led by the poet Javier Cecilia. Number 8, Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa. His alias is Chino Antrax. He is a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel. He was a leader and founding member of Los Antrax, an armed squadron formed to protect Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia, founding member of the Sinaloa cartel. He was arrested on the 30th of December 2013 at the Amsterdam airport Schiphol in the Netherlands, at the petition of the United States of America and with the help of Interpol on charges related to substance trafficking. The Sinaloa cartel's loss of partners in Mexico does not appear to have affected its ability to smuggle substances from South America to the USA. On the contrary, based on seizure reports, the Sinaloa cartel appears to be the most active smuggler of a powdery white substance. The reports also demonstrated the cartels possess the ability to establish operations in previously unknown areas, such as Central America and South America, even as far as Peru, Paraguay, and Argentina. It also appears to be most active in diversifying its export markets, rather than relying solely on the United States' substance consumption. It has made an effort to supply distributors of substances in Latin America and European countries. At number 7, Juan Manuel Alvarez Inzunza. A high-level money launderer for the Sinaloa cartel, he was sentenced to 188 months in prison for his role in a conspiracy to transfer millions of dollars in substance proceeds out of the United States. According to court records starting in 2013, agents with Homeland Security investigations intercepted the communications of Alvarez Inzunza and other high-level Sinaloa cartel members as they discussed the transfer of substance proceeds. Alvarez Inzunza, who had a law degree and worked as an attorney in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, regularly received requests originating from the top leadership of the cartel, including Ismael El Mayo Zambada and Joaquin Chapo Guzman, to arrange for the collection of substance proceeds in cities across the United States, including New York, Boston, Chicago, and Detroit. Alvarez Inzunza then worked with associates in Bogota, Colombia, to arrange for the transfer of those funds to Mexico, Central America, and other locations. At number 6, Francisco Javier Arellano Felix, a former Mexican substance lord who, alongside his brothers, founded and led the Tijuana cartel, aka the Arellano Felix organization, until his capture by the United States Coast Guard on August 16, 2006. The Tijuana cartel used to be one of the largest Mexican substance cartels. It is well known for its employment of enforcers recruited from Mexican and San Diego street gangs. In addition to enforcers, many Latin American street gangsters were trained to become assassins in the cartel, which has a reputation for extreme brutality and violence. In the late 1990s, the cartel was believed to be responsible for supplying nearly half the white powdery substances sold in the United States. The gang made headlines in January 2006 after it was discovered that they had dug tunnels from Tijuana, Baja California, into the United States at Otay Mesa, California. Number 5, Benjamin Arellano Felix. Benjamin was first arrested on the 18th of June 1982 in Downey, California for receiving 100 kilos of a white powdery substance smuggled through the San Ysidro border. However, he escaped custody. The Arellano Felix brothers obtained their first big break in 1989 when they inherited the organization from their uncle Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, after they showed early promise smuggling consumer electronics over the US-Mexico border. By 1998, the Arellano brothers had been indicted in the US for substance trafficking, and Ramon had been put on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, which we covered in a different video actually. Despite the brothers' audacity, they remained untouchable for 13 years. This was accomplished in part with large amounts of cash bribes to Mexican politicians and police commanders at the cost of an estimated $1 million per week. Benjamin Arellano tried to clear his name after the 1993 slaughter of Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo, in which he had been implicated. That high-profile assassination brought international attention to his trafficking organization, and although this forced Benjamin to lie low and adopt false names, he continued to live in a casual confidence, apparently unafraid of capture. Another one of Benjamin's brothers, Francisco, was arrested soon after a meeting with some people on substance charges, and Benjamin, Ramon, and Javier officially became fugitives. Number 4, Miguel Caro Quintero. He was born in Caborca, Sonora, Mexico in 1963. Previously arrested in 1992 on charges of tax evasion, he was found not guilty, which the DEA attributes to the use of threats and bribes by Caro Quintero. While imprisoned, it is believed Caro Quintero was still running the Sonora cartel, where he is serving a prison sentence for racketeering, substance smuggling, and money laundering. Caro Quintero was arrested in December 2001 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. Prior to his arrest, he repeatedly stated he is innocent of the charges and has accused the DEA of pursuing a vendetta against him for his brother Rafael Caro Quintero's alleged role in the execution of DEA Special Agent Enrique Camarena. Miguel Caro Quintero is noted as having called into a radio station to profess his innocence, stating, "If I had a cartel, I'd have a lot of money and my brother wouldn't be there, in jail," and claiming to be an innocent rancher. He further stated he does not believe his brother was involved in the execution of the DEA agent at all. Number 3, Jefe de Jefe. Apparently, this guy was known for executing a DEA agent and was originally going to be sent to prison, but things changed. He was instead only put on house arrest. The Mexican president at the time told the media that he had diseases wrong with him that couldn't be treated in prison, and thus house arrest was issued. I don't know, sounds a bit fishy. Number 2, Villarreal Barragan. He was born in Torreon, Coahuila on September 21st, 1969, and began his criminal career as a car thief in the state of Coahuila. And in 1990, at age 20, he was admitted to the Coahuila Judicial Police Force. Several years later, in 1993, he was admitted to the federal police, which was led by the Office National Security Commission and was stationed at Nuevo Laredo. Villarreal Barragan was then stationed at Reynosa, Tamaulipas, where he worked until 1996, when he established a business relationship with the Juarez cartel. Between the years of 2007 and 2010, Villarreal Barragan left the Juarez organization to work along with the Gulf cartel and for Los Zetas, but later incorporated into the Sinaloa cartel, commanding a criminal cell of the Beltran Leyva cartel. Allegedly, he was hired by the Beltran Leyva cartel, and by 2007 he rose to the rank of lieutenant for Arturo Beltran Leyva. Following Arturo's death in December 2009, during a shootout with Marines, infighting broke out for the control of the Beltran Leyva cartel. One faction is led by Lieutenants Edgar Valdez Villarreal and Gerardo Alvarez Vasquez, while the other is led by the current leader, Hector Beltran Leyva, and his enforcer lieutenant, Sergio Villarreal Barragan. At number 1, Hector Huerta Rios, also known by his nickname La Burra, which means the donkey in English. The donkey. He was a Mexican suspected substance lord and high-ranking member of the Beltran Leyva cartel, a criminal group based in Sinaloa. Huerta Rios was the leader of the organization's operations in the city of Monterrey. On March 24th, 2009, the Mexican military arrested Huerta Rios at his luxury car dealership in San Pedro Garza Garcia, along with his 4 bodyguards. Also seized were numerous weapons including 2 AK-47s, 1 AR-15, grenades, and several pistols. 18 luxury vehicles, 8,000 Mexican pesos, and $12,840 in US currency. Huerta Rios was reportedly executed on July 4th, 2019. Number 10, Rhonda Johnson and Sharon Shaw.
There was a path that came through here, and some kids were actually riding dirt bikes, and they got a foul odor.
Rhonda Renee Johnson and Sharon Lynn Shaw were 2 American girls who disappeared in Harris County, Texas on the afternoon of August 4th, 1971. In early 1972, the skeletal remains of both girls were discovered in and around Clear Lake near Galveston Bay. A local man, Michael Lloyd Self, was charged with the executions in 1972 and convicted of Shaw's execution in 1975. Controversy arose in 1998 when convicted Terminator Edward Harold Bell confessed to both executions. Bell's confession and corroborating statements from both law enforcement and prosecutors that Self had been coerced into a false confession led many to believe that Self had been wrongfully convicted. Self passed away in prison in 2000. The case has often been associated with the Texas Deli Fields, a 25-acre section of land off of Interstate 45 in League City, where the bodies of 4 young women have been discovered since the 1980s.
2 years later, they found the skeleton of another young woman. While the police were looking around the area, they come across a 3rd skeleton, one after another after another.
A fictionalized film about the area, titled Texas Deli Fields, was released in 2011.
911, what is your emergency?
Help me. A man in my house. No!
On January 3rd, 1972, two guys fishing in Clear Lake discovered a human skull floating in the water, which they had initially believed to be a sports ball. 6 weeks later, searchers discovered the rest of the body, along with that of another girl in a marsh near the lake. According to a coroner's inquest filed on February 17, 1972, the skull found in the lake was determined via dental records to have belonged to Shaw. Additionally, a crucifix found wrapped around the jawbone of the skull was identified by Shaw's mother to have belonged to her daughter. The other body found in the marsh was positively identified as Johnson. Number 9. Michelle Garvey. Michelle Garvey went missing from New London, Connecticut, presumably after running away from home on June 1st, 1982. She was believed to have intended to return to her birth state, New Jersey, or to North Carolina. She had a previous history of running away, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Initially, it was unknown what happened to Garvey, as she may have left home to start a new life and was thought to have possibly been still alive. Garvey's body was found on July 1st, 1982 in Baytown, Texas, 1 month after she went missing. Authorities were unable to identify her body, but could determine that the victim was a white female between 15 and 20 years old with blue eyes and curly red hair. The cause of removal of the victim was determined to be strangulation. The girl was also approximately 5 feet 1 inch to 5 feet 3 inches, or 1.6 meters tall, and had one of her ears pierced. Her body was found wearing brown clothing, including a long-sleeved button-down shirt with a distinct horse embroidery on the breast pocket. Her pants were made of corduroy material. The body was disposed of in a field after she passed away, possibly merely hours after her slaughter. She was buried near two other unidentified slaughter victims found in 1981 who were identified in 2021 as Dean and Tina Klaus. Number 8. Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson. Galveston residents Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson both disappeared. People who knew them stated that the two had been best friends since childhood and were almost inseparable. Besides, the pair shared a love for surfing, and being teenage girls, were pretty popular with their friends' circle. They were also brilliant students and had big aspirations for their future, which were destroyed by a crime fueled by hatred. Debbie and Maria were supposed to travel to Houston, Texas on November 15, 1971. However, since the girls were traveling together, they assured their parents that they would somehow hitchhike to the place. Moreover, they were also excited to be journeying on their own and set out early in the day. Later, Galveston residents mentioned that they spotted Debbie and Maria standing near an island ice cream shop, tagging down passing vehicles. Eventually, a man in a white van stopped by the curbside and picked the girls up after agreeing to drive them to Houston. Shockingly, that was the last time anyone saw Debbie and Maria alive, as they disappeared soon after. When Debbie and Maria's family learned that the teens had not reached Houston on time, they got extremely worried and contacted local authorities. Galveston police got in touch with law enforcement officials in Houston, and the authorities launched a statewide search for the missing girls. There was absolutely no news for 2 days, and the families began fearing the worst. Tragically, their fears were confirmed when Debbie and Maria's deceased bodies were eventually located in Turner's Bayou near Texas City. An autopsy later mentioned that both teens were shot before being tied down and drowned in the bayou. Number 7. Donna Prudhomme. In 1991, people passing the fields found a fourth body of a woman who was referred to as a Jane Doe until January 2019, when Audrey Lee Cook was also identified. Donna Prudhomme lived most of her life in Port Arthur, Texas, and was married with 2 sons. She left her husband and took her children when he became abusive, the FBI reported. Donna asked her sister, Diane, to mail her birth certificate to her home in Clear Lake near the end of the 1980s, and after that, she never heard from Donna again. Prudhomme's sisters said she was a beautiful woman and mother and loved fishing and Cajun food, according to the FBI. Number 6. Laura Miller. Laura Miller had recently moved to League City with her family and also went missing. Miller was musically gifted, according to the FBI, and attended Clear Creek High School, per People magazine. She had a rough time in school as she began to have seizures that forced her to miss school, quit her choir, and have trouble in her social life. On September 10th, 1984, she asked if she could call her boyfriend from a payphone, since her family's phone wasn't set up yet, according to the FBI. Her mother agreed and drove her to a payphone, with Laura walking half a mile to get back home. She never made it back to the house, and police deemed her just a runaway at first. But months passed without the family hearing from her, and on February 2nd, 1986, 17 whole months after she first disappeared, her body was discovered by 2 children playing in the woods near a dirt trail just south of League City, right by the very same field as where another person was found, per ABC 13 and the FBI. Number 5. Audrey Lee Cook. While searching for another individual, police found a third unidentified body, naming her a Jane Doe, until she was identified in January 2019. Cook was a 30-year-old mechanic living in Houston, Channel View, and Heights in Texas. Her family described her as free-spirited, according to ABC 13. The last time she was ever seen was in December 1985, which is also when her family stopped hearing from her. On February 2nd, 1986, the same day Miller was found, detectives discovered Audrey Lee's decomposed body, which showed that she had been shot in the back and had several broken ribs, ABC 13 reported. She was identified after 33 years using technology to reconstruct her face and showing it on the news, per ABC 13. Eventually, the FBI got involved and they were eventually able to determine their identity. Number 4. Sandra Rambler. Sandra was last seen in her family's residence in Santa Fe, Texas on October 26, 1983. She disappeared from their house and has not been seen again. The door to the home was open and biscuits were baking in the oven at the time Sandra vanished. Her coat and purse were also located inside the residence. She was initially believed to have gone to the store for a moment, but she never returned to the house. Some reports may state that Sandra disappeared while en route to school during the morning hours. Sandra's father reported her as a missing person during the following morning. Authorities initially classified her as a runaway, but the circumstances surrounding her disappearance are unclear. Several investigators believed Sandra may have started a new life for herself with an assumed identity, but there is little evidence available in her case. Sandra's case may be related to a string of disappearances and/or slaughters of young women from the Galveston County, Texas area since the 1970s. Michelle Thomas vanished in 1985 and Suzanne Renee Richardson disappeared in 1988. Law enforcement has not determined if these 4 cases are connected. Number 3. Janet Doe. While leads have dwindled over the years, science and technology have advanced. In January 2019, Renison received a call that breathed new life into this cold case, the identification of Jane Doe and Janet Doe. Jane Doe, found in 1986, was Audrey Lee Cook. Cook had worked as a mechanic and lived in the Houston Channel View and area Heights of Texas. She was last seen in December 1985. Janet Doe, who was found in 1991, was identified as Donna Prudhomme, mentioned earlier. Knowing the names of the women has given Renison and the local police something to work for. They're contacting neighbors and friends and reviewing police records from that time. A key part of the investigation is appealing to the public for help. Renison and local police need to talk to anyone who can provide additional information. Details as simple as where the women worked or the names of their friends who haven't been interviewed yet could be key to solving the slaughters. Number 2. Audrey Cook. An unidentified person described as a free-spirited individual who was a motorcyclist moved into the Houston area with her girlfriend in 1976 from Memphis, Tennessee at age 21, following a number of years residing in California. She had worked as a mechanic for a golf cart company in 1979, Harrison Equipment Company in 1980, Balloon Affair in 1981, and then as a mechanic for National Rent-A-Car during unknown times. She was last heard from in late December 1985 and is believed to have sold and used substances. She was also said to have become associated with the wrong crowd. Despite this, her family received numerous letters indicating her life was enjoyable at the time, though lacking specificity with details that could be valuable during the investigation into her passing. Her family had spent years trying to locate her. Their remains were found in a field in the 3000 block of Calder Road, on the same day that the body of Laura Miller was located nearby. The victims' bodies were not buried, rather hidden from view. Both were left in a supine position near a tree. At the time, Miller's case had already received significant public attention, having been reported missing nearly a year and a half before. The crime scene contained a significant amount of debris. Investigators were thorough in documenting potential evidence at the scene, including discarded keys, shoes, business cards, and hair. The victim had been shot in the back, and she had suffered additional injuries to several ribs. Similarly, Heidi Fye, 25, discovered in the same vicinity, had also suffered significant trauma to the ribs. Number 1. Shelly Sykes. On May 24, 1986, a day of drinking at the beach ended when John Robert King, driving Gerald Swartz's car, ran Sykes off the road as she drove home from working at Guido's restaurant along with Galveston Seawall. Sykes' car was found the next morning along Interstate 45 near Dickinson, and the 19-year-old college student was never seen alive again. Sykes is presumed terminated, but her body was never found. In 1987, King called El Paso police from a motel there and confessed to the crime, but without a body, police could not charge him or Zwarst with slaughter. The men were convicted of aggravated kidnapping in separate trials in 1988, and both were sentenced to life in prison. Although they were not ruling on slaughter charges, former Galveston County Sheriff Gene Leonard said when interviewed in 2007 that jurors in both trials were convinced that King and Zworst ended Sykes. Zworst had his first parole hearing in June 2007, 20 years after his conviction. The parole board denied his request and ordered that he become eligible again after 5 years, the maximum period under Texas law. Number 10. Yulan Adone Archaga Carrillas. A Honduran fugitive and the suspected leader of the MS-13 gang in Honduras, who was added to the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list on November 3, 2021, Yulan is wanted for racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and firearms offenses. Archaga Carrillas is allegedly in charge of MS-13 for all of Honduras, and is believed to be providing firearms, narcotics, and cash to gang members who are operating within the United States. He's also believed to be responsible for ordering the executions of rival gang members. Authorities believe he is still in Honduras. Archaga Carrillas was the 526th fugitive to be placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. He replaced American fugitive Robert William Fisher, who was removed from the list for no longer meeting the list criteria. The FBI is offering a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to his capture. Number 9. Gilmer Hoofdrad. Hoofdrad was born on the 17th of December 1962 in Paramaribo. He is a chess player and became national youth champion in 1978, 1979, and 1980. He studied economics at the University of Santiago de Cuba, and in 1988, Hoofdrad started working for the Central Bank of Suriname and was a part-time lecturer at the Anton de Kom University. In 1991, he became a full-time professor. In 1999, he started working for the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. In 2010, Hoofdrad was appointed governor of the central bank. In 2015, he was appointed to the Ministry of Finance of Suriname in the cabinet of Desi Bouterse. During his tenure, he took out 92 loans, increasing the debt from $9.2 billion to $20.7 billion in Suriname currency. In 2019, the Progressive Reform Party reported Hoofdrad to the Prosecutor General for exceeding the debt ceiling. On the 1st of November 2019, the National Assembly voted for a new law which no longer criminalized exceeding the debt ceiling. In January 2020, it was reported that $100 million in US currency was missing from the cash reserves at the central bank. Vice President Ashwin Adden explained that the money was used to buy potatoes and onions. In April 2021, the Prosecutor General filed a request to prosecute Hoofdrad for dubious transactions between the central bank and the Belgian company Clearfield. On the 11th of July, an Interpol red notice was issued for money laundering, embezzlement, and corruption. On the 23rd of July, an exit ban was issued. On the 30th of July, it was reported that he had been spotted in Skeldon, Guyana. On the 17th of December 2021, Hoofdrad was sentenced in absentia to 12 years imprisonment and a fine of $500,000. He was found guilty of violating the anti-corruption laws, misuse of state resources, participating in a criminal organization, and embezzlement. On the 24th of December, an appeal was filed. Number 8. Billy Alvarez. Guillermo Hector Alvarez Cuevas was born on the 8th of September 1945 to Guillermo Alvarez Marcia and Maria del Carmen Cuevas Saldana in the town of Haso Hidalgo. Alvarez Cuevas is the eldest of 3 siblings, Jose Alfredo, Maria del Carmen, and Maria Gilda. Alvarez briefly played professional football at Cruz Azul Hidalgo as a forward in 1976. In 1986, Alvarez became president of the football club Cruz Azul. He was later appointed chairman of Cooperativa La Cruz Azul SCL on the 1st of July 1988. On the 28th of May 2020, the Unidad de Inteligencia Financiera froze the financial accounts of Alvarez, his brother Jose Alfredo, and ex-vice president of Cruz Azul, Victor Manuel Garces, citing money laundering and financial ties to shell companies worth over 300 million pesos, which is approximately $15 million in US currency. Their investigation suggested that between 2013 and 2020, 1.2 billion Mexican pesos, or $60.6 million US dollars, were transferred from the Cruz Azul cooperative into personal offshore bank accounts, namely in the US and Spain. On the 26th of July 2020, the Attorney General of Mexico, Alejandro Gertz Manero, issued an arrest warrant for Alvarez and Garces for ties with criminal organizations. Arrest warrants were also issued for directors of the Cruz Azul Cooperative, Miguel Eduardo Burrell, Mario Sanchez Alvarez, and Angel Martin Junquera. Cruz Azul faced disaffiliation from the Mexican Football Federation as a result of Alvarez's legal issues. He resigned as the general manager of the cooperative and subsequently stepped down as president of the football club on the 1st of August 2020 after 32 years as acting president. Jamie Ordialis was then appointed as the cooperative's general manager and the club's president. Number 7. Jan Marsalik. Marsalik went to school in Austria but did not obtain a degree. At the age of 19, he founded an e-commerce software company. He started working for Wirecard in 2000 and was initially hired for his knowledge on WAP systems. On the 1st of February 2010, he became the firm's chief operating officer and also joined the company board. His last known residence before he became a fugitive was in Munich. Marsalik is considered one of the main culprits in the Wirecard accounting scandal. The Financial Times reported that Marsalik is a person of interest for a number of European governments due to his alleged links to Russian intelligence. Investigation by Bellingcat, Der Spiegel, and The Insider indicated that Marsalik flew to Minsk hours after he was fired. On the 19th of July 2020, the German Handelsblatt reported that Marsalik was suspected to be in Russia, where he was believed to live under supervision of GRU in a mansion near Moscow. According to Russian media, Marsalik could have been a longtime asset of GRU, recruited at the end of the 1990s through the Austrian-Russian Friendship Society. Among his friends were GRU Colonel Andriy Chuprigin, Stanislav Petlinsky, former officer to the presidential administration in Russia, as well as Rami al-Obaidi, former chief of Libyan intelligence. Marsalik boasted about trips he made to Palmyra as a guest of the Russian military, and helped set up the presence of the Wagner Group in Libya. In August 2020, Interpol issued a red notice for Marsalik, which is a request to law enforcement worldwide to locate and arrest him pending extradition. Number 6. Monica Witt. Monica Elfriede Witt is a former United States Air Force technician sergeant and defense contractor who defected to Iran in 2013. She is a fugitive from a United States Department of Justice indictment for espionage against the United States since 2018. Born in Texas, Witt enlisted in the US Air Force in 1997 as a linguist and studied the Persian language at the Defense Language Institute before becoming an airborne cryptologic language analyst. She was then assigned to the Department of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, OSI, as an enlisted counterintelligence special agent until separating from the Air Force in 2008. She continued working in intelligence as a military contractor until 2010. After her 2012 conversion to Islam in Iran, Witt became increasingly focused on the religion and the region. Her master's degree capstone presentation lauded them both, and she was soon affiliated with Marzia Hashmi, a suspected Iranian intelligence operative. With Hashemi's assistance, Witt defected to Iran in 2013 and provided the Islamic Republic with assistance and intelligence stemming from her work for and with the United States government. Number 5. Eugene Palmer. A federal arrest warrant was issued for Eugene Palmer on June 10, 2013. He was wanted at the time for an execution he committed. Family members of his have expressed their belief that he passed away in the park. However, according to Haverstraw police, nobody was ever discovered after multiple searches of the area. Palmer depends on medications for a heart condition and diabetes. Eugene Palmer is an outdoorsman, an experienced hunter, angler, and hiker, and is also described as a car enthusiast. He has a deformed left thumb. Authorities believed he may be hiding in Florida or upstate New York, where he has relatives. On May 29, 2019, Palmer was added to the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. On August 17, 2021, acting on a tip, the FBI searched the home of one of Palmer's granddaughters in Warwick, New York, but ultimately found nothing. On July 20, 2022, Palmer was removed from the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, and it was determined that he no longer fit the list criteria. He was replaced by Omar Alexander Cardenas. Despite his removal, he remains a wanted fugitive. Number 4. Nemesio Aseguera Cervantes. Nemesio Aseguera Cervantes, commonly referred to by his alias El Mencho, is a Mexican substance lord and leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, an organized crime group based in Jalisco. He is the most wanted person in Mexico and one of the most wanted in the US. Both governments are offering up to $30 million in Mexican currency and $10 million in United States currency, respectively, for information leading to his arrest. He is wanted for substance trafficking, organized crime involvement, and undocumented possession of firearms. El Mencho is allegedly responsible for coordinating global substance trafficking operations. Under his command, the CJNG became one of Mexico's leading criminal organizations. Born into poverty in Mexico, El Mencho grew avocados and dropped out of primary school before immigrating illegally to the US in 1980s. After being arrested several times, he was deported to Mexico in the early 1990s and worked for the Milenio cartel. He eventually climbed to the top of the criminal organization and founded the CJNG after several of his bosses were arrested or terminated. His notoriety is also a result of his aggressive leadership and sensationalist acts of violence against both rival criminal groups and Mexican security forces alike. These attacks brought him increased government attention and an extensive manhunt. Security forces suspect he is hiding in the rural terrains of Jalisco, Michoacán, Nayarit, and or Colima, and is guarded by mercenaries with former military training. In February 2022, unconfirmed reports began to surface that El Mencho passed away in a private hospital in Guadalajara, but he still could be out there. Number 3. Bhadresh Kumar Patel. On the night of April 12, 2015, Patel and Palak, his wife, were working a night shift at a Dunkin' Donuts in Hanover, Maryland. The store was owned by a relative of Patel, whom the couple were visiting. Surveillance footage showed Palak and Patel walking together in the kitchen at around 9:30 p.m. before disappearing out of view behind some racks. Moments later, Patel re-emerged without his wife, turned off an oven, and left the store. The body of 21-year-old Palak Patel was found later that night. She had been beaten and stabbed multiple times with a large kitchen knife. Investigators believe the couple had an argument, with Palak wanting to return to India and Patel wishing to remain in the US instead. Authorities believed Patel could have fled the country or could be hiding with relatives. Patel had a visa to be in the US, but it had expired by the time he carried out the execution. A report stated that because of this, there was no indication he was able to legally leave the country. An investigation with Palak's family into the termination revealed that the last conversation she had with them was about wishing to return home to India. This call was made moments before Palak was ended by her husband and had been overheard by him. Police believe that Patel removed his wife for this reason. Patel has connections in Canada, India, New Jersey, Kentucky, Georgia, and Illinois. A reward up to $100,000 is available for information that leads to his whereabouts. Number 2. Arnaldo Jimenez. Arnaldo Jimenez and Estrella Carrera were married on May 11, 2012 at Chicago City Hall. Carrera had 2 children. The couple had dinner with family and friends one night and then headed to a nightclub, which they left at around 4 a.m. on the morning of May 12th. It is believed by the FBI that on the way home, the couple got into a heated argument in Jimenez's black 2006 4-door Maserati. Jimenez then fatally stabbed Carrera multiple times in his car and dragged her body into her apartment. Carrera's body was dumped in the bathtub at her apartment, and she was still wearing the same silver dress she wore to the wedding. Carrera was meant to pick up her children from family members on May 12th, but she never showed up. Her family members then reported her missing to police. Her body was found inside her apartment on the afternoon of May 13th, and police confirmed there was no sign of a forced entry. Jimenez had also disappeared and his car was nowhere to be found. 3 days later, on May 15th, Jimenez was charged with first-degree execution and a state warrant was issued for his arrest. A federal warrant followed after he was charged with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution on May 17th. Investigators began tracking Jimenez and found that on May 12th he had used his cell phone in Chicago, then Southern Illinois. It was later used in Memphis, Tennessee, and then in Arkansas. On May 13th, he had made calls from Houston and then in Hidalgo, Mexico. In September 2012, police made a substance arrest on Jimenez's brother, Humberto. During the search of his property, police discovered Arnaldo's black Maserati in the garage. Blood was found inside the car, leading police to the conclusion that Jimenez had ended Carrera in his car and then dragged her body into the bathtub inside her apartment. Police believe Humberto drove Arnaldo to Mexico in his car and left him there. The FBI believes Jimenez is still hiding in Durango, Mexico, specifically in the area of Santiago Papasquero, and he may also be hiding in Reynosa, Tamaulipas, Mexico. Number 1. Vasilis Palaiokostas. Palaiokostas grew up in a small village in the mountains of central Greece. Palaiokostas became famous for his habit of giving most of his money to poor families, making him a local Robin of the Poor, reminiscent of the famous tale of Robin Hood. In 2000, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the 1995 kidnapping of Alexander Haitaglu, the CEO of Haitaglu Brothers. On the afternoon of Sunday, June 4th, 2 accomplices hired a trip on a sightseeing helicopter from Agios Kosmas, a coastal suburb of Athens. They hijacked the helicopter using a pistol and a hand grenade and forced the pilot to fly to a prison. When the helicopter arrived, guards believed the helicopter was a visit from prison inspectors. The helicopter flew the prisoners to a cemetery nearby, where they transferred to motorcycles and fled from there. Palaiokostas was recaptured 2 years later on August 2nd, 2008, in Thessaloniki. On the afternoon of Sunday, February 22nd, Palaiokostas again escaped from Athens' Korydallos prison by helicopter. He and his cellmate Alket Rizai, 34, climbed a rope ladder thrown to them by a female passenger in the helicopter as it flew over the prison courtyard. Guards on the ground opened fire and the woman fired back with an automatic rifle. No injuries were reported due to the short gunfight, although one prison guard injured himself while trying to pull out his gun. Police said an elderly couple found the helicopter abandoned in the Athenian suburb of Kapandridi, near a highway north of Athens, with its fuel tank leaking from a bullet hole. The pilot was bound and gagged with a hood over his head. He told police that the helicopter was chartered by a couple who said they wanted to go from the town of Oedia in central Greece to Athens. The couple had chartered the helicopter a number of times in the previous weeks, with the woman posing as a businesswoman. According to the pilot, who claimed to have been forced into taking part in the escape, Palaiokostas and Rizai were delivered to a getaway car. The government of Greece faced intense criticism after a second escape from the same facility, and the government responded by firing 3 Justice Ministry officials and arresting 3 prison guards. Palaiokostas is still at large with a €1 million bounty placed on him for information leading to his arrest. His accomplice Alkit Rizai was rearrested in November 2009.